Hello there, lovely people, it's Alex from Nintendo Life here. Now, I'm sure you've probably heard the news, Miiverse is dead. Well, it's not quite dead yet, but it is certainly on life support. It's being cut out on the 8th of November, I think, is when it finally ends, and that's going to be on all platforms, presumably. And I just wanted to sort of take a moment to say, will anyone miss it? Well, I put this forward to you lovely people over on Twitter. If you want to get involved with the conversation, you can follow me at AlexOnly on Twitter. That'll be lovely. There'll also be a link in the description if you fancy doing it that way. So yeah, I put this idea forward on Twitter, you know, more in a sort of a jokey way, you know, yeah, is anyone really going to miss it beyond the bad Miiverse posts? And the response genuinely surprised me. My overall thought of Miiverse as the general consensus was that it was generally a bit of a waste of time, you know, sort of not really worth anyone's time or effort, and that most people just left it alone. You know, when it started off, it was an interesting idea, and then it just sort of, you know, everybody just sort of left it to stagnate. But I was surprised. There were a lot of people who actually say they will genuinely miss Miiverse, and they genuinely have had a lot of fun on there. They've made friendships, and, you know, some of them are still going. And, you know, people genuinely really like Miiverse. And yeah, as I've said before, I was really surprised. I did try and use Miiverse a bit back in the day when it was, you know, I was at university, and in the mornings when I wasn't doing my assignments, I needed something to do. And it was around about the time just before Super Smash Bros. For Wii U came out, so there were all the posts going up about new Smash Bros. Stuff, and it was really exciting. And, you know, so I sort of bled in and started doing other things on Miiverse. And I think even when I was, you know, started doing this channel, I was doing the occasional thing on Miiverse, saying, check me out on YouTube and stuff like that. And it kind of fell on deaf ears. But, you know, I was using Miiverse. And it was fine, but, you know, like I said, everything seemed to fall on deaf ears. It's a weird platform. Most of the comments that I saw on there and most of the posts generally were just dull. They were just uninteresting, dull, tedium things. You know, people would try and make games as well, you know, saying things like, you know, sort of, name a character and I'll try and guess what game it's from, you know, really riveting things like that, which is fine, but it's just, for me especially, it's really tiresome. And I lost interest really, really quickly. And I never really went back to it, apart from when I, you know, said when I started doing this, I tried doing a little bit of promotion. It didn't really work. The only other time I really used it was when, you know, Super Mario Maker and stuff like that. And, you know, then, you know, so there was a bit more traction and stuff like that because Super Mario Maker actually employed it in a way that was really good and worked. And I've just realized something. Actually, no, it's fine for a second there, and I even started recording a bit of it saying Super Mario Maker won't work anymore, but you still just get the codes and you can just share them on other social media manually. So, yeah, let's move on. So, when it was announced that it was being cancelled, I was just a bit like, and, you know, whatever, you know, good riddance, kind of. It never really did anything for me personally, and so I didn't really see it as a loss, you know, as a social media platform. It kind of flopped on a grand scale. But then people started telling me about the things that had happened on Miiverse for them and how they'd used it, and I think the big thing is artists. You know, there's a huge artist community on there, and they, you know, use different channels and this and that and the other. And, you know, sort of, yes, one could argue that, well, you can just draw on a piece of paper, take a photograph of it, and upload it to Twitter. And, yeah, you can do that, and I'm sure there are a lot of artists who do. In fact, I know there are a lot of artists who do that. But there's something about the immediacy of Miiverse. You know, sort of, you're playing your game, and you go in there, and you have this little window that you can just draw on with a stylus, and you can draw, and you can, some of the things that people have made are absolutely gorgeous. Most of them aren't, it has to be said, but a lot of them are real, genuinely fantastic works of art. And I think part of the appeal may even be the limitations that Miiverse puts forward. Or if you're watching this after the November the 8th, did put forward, that really wasn't worth doing. By having such a limited number of pixels you can use, and more importantly, just one color, well, arguably two, black and white, you've got blank canvas and you've got ink, you really have to be really creative in order to create something that looks really good. And I think that means it makes the art all the more rewarding when you can make something that looks that good with such limitations, and I can understand why it's popular. The bulk of Miiverse, though, is honestly, I know some people say that they really enjoy it, but you know, it's such a closed-off community. It's little miniature gardens of people shouting at each other back and forth, with only a few other people listening and generally just ignoring other people. When you compare it to something like Twitter, where realistically you're shouting things out to a global audience, and okay, you know, sort of most people won't hear you, but then some people are hearing what you say and they're repeating what you say, and it spreads like a virus. You can't have that with Miiverse in a traditional sense. You can share things from Miiverse on Twitter, and believe me, a lot of people do. But I think that's the reason why Miiverse didn't really take off. It was always sort of, I mean, it had a bit of a rise, but then it just sort of, you know, pittered away. It was just sort of, it was still there, it was just sort of tiding over, it was going by, and there were a few very passionate people really keeping the community alive, but it wasn't a very big community. And I think, well, apart from the fact that obviously it's Nintendo-centric, so you're going to have a very limited audience, you know, Miiverse was never really going to be massive, and I don't think maybe it was ever intended to be massive, but even so, I think that's one of the reasons why it's being cancelled. Also, does it really have a place? You know, when there are things like Twitter and Facebook and all these other things, and Instagram and YouTube even, you know, is there really a place for such a small social media site? I don't know, I honestly don't. For me personally, there isn't, but, you know, for a few people, clearly there is. And so, for those people, it's a shame that it's going. For me, it's not, I'm gonna be honest. It's not a shame that it's going. But, you know, there are people who clearly really enjoyed it, so it is a shame in that regard. So, Miiverse is dying. Does anyone care? Yeah. Some people do. But what do you think? Do you think Miiverse is a waste of time, or do you think it's the best thing ever that is no longer to exist very shortly? Let us know down there in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you discuss whether or not the new recent YouTube changes mean that is anyone gonna miss the old subscribe button? That's your question. And be sure to check out NintendoLife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye bye.